He's the ultimate pros. We bring in our man John Dickinson. JD, all good, buddy?
What's going on, fellas? You let me know you can hear me. Pros pro. I'm a couple minutes late, so I don't know.
No, you are right on time, my friend.
You're good. You're good.
You're frozen now, but you're on time. Like let's just talk about the important stuff. I think those Boston hotels, I don't think are doing us any favors. Can you confirm? You said you were on your way back to the hotel. You're in Boston.
I am in Boston, and I am back at the hotel, and just trying to get things situated. We getting a bad connection.
Man, I don't know, man, but that 95-7 the game, that's the good life out there, boy. They just send you off to the NBA finals. Like, man, they won't even send us to the studio. They sending y'all out to Boston to cover the Warriors. Man, that's the good life there in the Bay Area, JD.
It is. And look, I would love to not have to go to the studio. So I'll take that. I'll take exactly how you're rolling any time as far as that goes for regular shows, man. I try and get that in every contract. Studio optional.
It's not a bad gig. You got a feel for who the best team is in this series through 2 games?
Well, I thought going into the second quarter of game 2, it was the Celtics. And just their ability to withstand some of the Warriors' spurts, like the third quarter of game 1 and Steph Curry's big first quarter in game 1, and just kind of hang around in the game to where their defense could take full effect. But then it obviously changed a little bit in those middle 2 quarters in the game on Sunday, with the Warriors able to, I think, match the physicality and the defensive ability of the Celtics and make them uncomfortable, which in essence allowed the offense to not have so much pressure to do it on their own against an elite level defense. And then they freed some things up as the game went on. But to me, the story of the series was the Warriors to this point answering the bell and deciding that they weren't going to get pushed around anymore. At least in game 2, it broke everything open in the second half of that game. And now we'll see, like, it's the quintessential pivot point, guys, of do the Warriors continue tomorrow what they were able to do in game 2, or do the Celtics reaffirm some of the things they were able to do in game 1 and tell the Warriors, in essence, no, the outlier game was game 2, not game 1. I think neither team really fully knows right now.
Right. One of the things that me and Damien have talked about that just thought was big for what Golden State was trying to do defensively and being physical and being versatile is Gary Payton II being back into the lineup. Then you look at that, now you've got Payton, Draymond too, but Andrew Wiggins, all 3 of those guys being able to be physical, to switch, to guard different guys on the perimeter. And it seems like that really helped out what they wanted to do on the defensive end. And it could be a series-changing move for the Golden State Warriors.
No, I think that's a great point. I think, it's Peyton's body type, skill set, athleticism. It just plays well. He matches up well with the Boston wing players. And it's just somebody better than even Iguodala at this point. Oh. And I thought that was a low key, in a way, kind of a blessing for as great as Iguodala has been. If he's available, Steve Kerr's going to play him. And if he plays, then how do you find minutes for Peyton when he can be a liability some of the time offensively? So then are Iguodala and Peyton on the floor at the same time? And then what do you do with Draymond? And then is Looney out there too? So I think it becomes difficult for Steve Kerr to find 5-man groups to play if both of them had been available, knowing that Peyton was healthy enough. And I guess he wasn't healthy enough in game 1, but he seemed more than healthy enough in game 2. And I think the addition of Peyton and also the subtraction of Iguodala in a way may have helped the Warriors, just in that I got the sense, I don't know what you guys thought, but I got the sense in game 1 that the Celtics were, Iguodala got his 7 points, hit a couple shots, did some things, but he just physically at this stage of his career, maybe days away from retirement, literally can't run with us. Like, we're younger, faster, stronger. Like, it's cool that he's out there for those guys, but veteran leadership ain't what this is about. This is about, can you rip somebody? Can you get by somebody? And Iguodala wasn't really doing much of that. Can you stop somebody?
Right. Now they were looking at Iggy like food.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought that up as it like pertains to Andre Iguodala, and I don't think it's the same case, at least in terms of long term. Certainly not staring at retirement or anything like that. We saw Klay Thompson have an impact, especially on the defensive end, with switching over to Al Horford and some of the changes that Steve Kerr made there and that coaching staff made there in game number 2. I'd like to believe it was Sacramento Kings head coach Mike Brown that made those defensive changes that really led to this big turnaround for the Golden State Warriors. But Klay offensively, like, do you think that moment, do you think he's going to find that groove offensively in this series against the number 1 defense in the NBA? Or are we just looking at 14, 15 points from Klay on a nightly basis?
I think he's got one great game in him. I think there's one game where it doesn't matter whether he's well defended or not. He's just going to hit shots. I know Jaylen Brown today, from being over at TD Garden, he got asked about Klay and the defense and the job maybe that he's done on him, and he just completely downplayed it. He said, no, he's just missing shots. Like he wanted nothing that anybody was going to hear or think about, like they were doing something special. In fact, he even doubled down and said, no, we got to do better. We've made some mistakes. He's had some open looks. And I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good for if y'all are having the mistakes that you claim to where, he's been 10 for 33 to begin this series. So I don't think he can do it with regularity in a series this year. Next year, we'll see. I think maybe no. And then we do start having conversations about where's he at maybe in his career. But for this year, coming off of the injury, I think it's more about consistency or lack of consistency than anything. He still has the explosive games. They're just fewer and farther between. And I think there is one, though, of these next 3-4 games. There's one game where he will go off. And if it's a game where maybe Steph has a rough shooting night, it might be the reason the Warriors win that game. And that may in turn be the reason the Warriors wind up winning the championship. It's kind of remarkable, though, that the Warriors are in the position they're in to where they may be able to win the title with Klay in the finals, maybe only having one huge game. I would not have believed that on April the 16th when everything started.
I actually think it's going to be game 3 for him. I don't know, maybe it won't be his best game or anything like that. Maybe he'll have even a better game in this series. But I think game 3, he's going to respond. He's heard everything that everybody's had to say about the first 2 games of this series that he's played. And Klay's a champion. Klay's one of the all-time greats. I fully expect him to turn it around, starting with game 3. I think he's going to play a good game on Wednesday.
Yeah, and I think he's one that would be unaffected by the TD Garden environment. I think that's sort of another thing to look at. The Warriors have played in some hostile environments with some great crowds, and Oracle in the day was as good as anything. But Cleveland, I had the privilege of being able to go there for the finals, and Toronto was incredible. The atmosphere. I think this is going to be the toughest atmosphere that the Warriors have faced in terms of a road crowd and the energy and the edge that the crowd in Boston can have. And I'm interested to see how not so much the big 3 handle it, but how the other guys handle it in a point where, the Warriors are used to playing a lot of these game 3s up 2-0, and they don't really need the game. And so they can settle in, and you always get that burst from the opposition's crowd, and you can kind of handle it. And if things get away, you move on to the next one. You try to win the next one. The Warriors need this game. I'm sure you guys have talked about the 82% and all of that, 32 out of 39 when it's 1-1, game 3 winner wins the series and all of that. Yeah. They need this game. There's no real time for messing around and maybe, getting down big early and having to try to settle in.
JD, you said this. You used the term "big 3," and obviously you meant in reference to the guys who've been around Steph, Klay, Draymond. But like realistically, at the core of this Golden State Warriors team, is it still a big 3?
They would tell you it is, just based on the pedigree, right? I mean, that's the word that gets thrown around a lot around here in the Bay. It's the championship DNA, or to quote Bruce Bochy from the Giants years of winning, the champion's blood, right? The guys that They have that ability. And so I think it isn't necessarily, when you look at the numbers, a big three. And I think Clay's inconsistency is part of that. I mean, hell, even Steph he's been great these first two games, but you look at the numbers overall this year, they're down over what they'd been in previous years for him. And then Draymond has been, up and down, but I think, better version of himself certainly than he was a couple of years, during the pandemic years where it was just miserable. He looked like a lot of the time he didn't even enjoy being out there very much. But it's not a big three in the term of what it was, or maybe comparing it to other big threes. D'Lo, I think you're onto something there, but they've seemingly have enough from Wiggins, and Poole does enough this night, and Porter hits a couple shots that night. And
that's kind of what I was getting at. It
they offset it.
Yeah, this might be one of the better Golden State Warriors rosters we've seen during this run, with Steph still, he might not be peak Steph, but he's the best player in this series so far.
He has been. No doubt. I think he's the only player in the series that's played well in both games. When you go down the line of, I mean, Tatum, not really game one. I mean, I don't think Tatum was great in game two, although he did hit some shots to keep him in.
36 or something.
Yeah, he was much better in game one, but he didn't shoot it well in game one, right? But he kind of held it together and kept the ball moving, and the 13 assists and all that. And then Smart and Horford and Brown. Brown got after Draymond a little bit early, but as that game went on, Draymond stifled him. And so that, to the point about some of the maneuvering of switching it up. And, Al Horford, if he isn't open, if you're even within a foot of Al Horford, he's just going to keep the ball moving. And so he won't even think about taking a shot. So I thought the Warriors benefited from that switch as well. But yeah, they just got a little bit more from it. It's a little Spurs-ish from when Duncan and Parker and Ginobili weren't quite the same. Now you could say, well, Kawhi was becoming that dude at the back end of that, especially the year that they beat Miami in 2014. The Warriors don't really have that dude, but they maybe have more other options that can help along the way.
Yeah. You're listening to ESPN 1320 KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by Lashers, Elk Grove Dodge. We got our guy JD, John Dickinson of 95.7 The Game, out in Boston for the NBA Finals, man. We're talking to him a little bit about these finals. Draymond Green. I got a question for you, JD. I know everybody says Draymond is so smart and calculated. He is. He's very smart. He's very smart. I don't take that away from him at all. I wonder if he can fall into a little bit of a trap here with Boston. It's going to be, and hopefully in a sports way, nothing gets crazy, but it's going to be nasty in the TV Garden for Wednesday and Friday. They're going to be all over Draymond. And I wonder if maybe he may just get a little too emotional and get out of his game, get out of his element. I'm pretty sure the odds are he's going to get some kind of technical at some point. We all know he's not going to get a second technical. We know that's not going to happen. But is he going to be able to compose himself enough, do you think, in these two games in Boston to continue to play the type of basketball he's played? I thought he's played really well this whole playoff. So can he continue that with the emotions running high?
I think he can. I think there's something to be said for he didn't care if he gets the first one. And when you get that first one early, as you guys well know, sometimes they're just not going to call the second one unless you get really out of pocket. Mm-hmm. And he was borderline really out of pocket, maybe. Like we could debate it. But unless you really get out of pocket where it's blatant, they're probably not going to run you, especially when they already ran you earlier in the playoffs and then kind of admitted that maybe they shouldn't have run you. So, well, they didn't admit it, but I think most people thought maybe it was a little over the top when he got the boot in game one in Memphis. So I think it's interesting to look at, as far as him keeping his composure. I actually look at it the other way too. And we're going to find out the answer, because I didn't love a lot of the talking from the Boston side of it. I didn't really like Jaylen Brown's comments after game 2. And not that he was wrong, but all of the talking and the physicality and the stuff that maybe Draymond gets away with, and he does get away with a lot. You got to go play through it. Like, you can't be worried about Draymond if you're the Celtics. Like, you got to play basketball. And I wonder if the Celtics are not maybe going to let that get in their head a little bit as the team with less experience. So I do think it cuts both ways. I'm not sure we have a firm answer. I also think Draymond sometimes knows when he's got a game to play with. And what I mean is, let's say game 3 goes awry and they're getting on him and he does blow his stack and he gets run. He also still knows that there's game 4. And then maybe in game 4, are they gonna throw him out again in game 4? They just threw him out in game 3. Like, I think he has figured out a way to almost use his reputation to his advantage in that there's some give, but then he doesn't let him take all of it, or he gets a little bit back on the back end maybe for being over the top on the front end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we need to see some Luke Cornett minutes. I'm telling you. Luke Cornett doing a JoJo English. Get him in there.
I think all things considered, the Celtics did respond pretty well. Because when you look back at that first quarter, I think it was a 2-point game at half. And the bulk of the Draymond Green stuff happened in the first half. It wasn't until late in the third quarter where things had got away. Now, the story after the game was about the physicality of, it was centered on Draymond Green, but the entire Golden State Warriors team was very, very physical in that. And then you had some of the different plays involving Draymond Green, of course, the Grant Williams one and some of those different calls. But overall,
let's also say they got a good whistle in that game. And I apologize.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the Warriors got a good whistle in that game. Like, let's just be real about that. I know in the Bay sometimes it's like, oh, well, what are you talking about? Every fan thinks they are the aggrieved, right? Their team is. But the Warriors got a really favorable whistle that I think allowed them to kind of gather themselves on Sunday.
Yeah,
I don't think that overly impacted the game, though. Like, there were some missed calls, like the Jaylen Brown and Gary Payton. Like, there were some calls that they just missed, but you don't look back at those and go, whoo, boy, that really cost the Celtics. It was the end of the third quarter. It was turnovers, which is the first thing Ime Udoka will tell you. It was turnovers, and the simultaneous of them turning the ball over, them missing the few shots that they were getting, and the Warriors seemingly not missing at the end of that third quarter. That's what killed them. That's what ended the game.
No, can the Celtics offense do enough, I think, is sort of the other question as the series goes on. For as elite as their defense is, and I think it will be great again in the games in Boston, even though they haven't played as well at home, the 5-4 at home, they've had a tendency to come out a little flat, which is bizarre to me, considering maybe they are maybe it either feels a little too big, or there's been a couple of times where they've thought in the Milwaukee series, hey, it's 2-2, we're home, we got this, and then they don't play with the urgency they need and they lose. Hey, it's 3-2 on Miami, everybody's burying Miami. They're done. They're broken. I mean, I was doing it. I'll admit it. And then they don't come out and play with the appropriate force, and Miami gets them. And then they've been able to re-win games on the road after some of those games. But if they're going to win this series, I mean, you could make a case if they're going to win the series, they might have to win both games at home. I think they have to win game 3 at home. I really do think game 3 over game 4 is the important one, because it sends the statement back to the Warriors that we're here and you didn't figure out what you think you figured out in game 2. That was the outlier. That needs to be the Celtics MO for this thing, that when we're talking about the 3 games as a whole, that game 2 was the outlier in that third quarter that flipped everything.
JD, I said it yesterday. I said if the Celtics win these 2 games in Boston, they'll win the NBA Finals. If they lose either one, I don't care if it's 3 or 4. If they lose either one, the Warriors are winning the NBA Finals.
And the stat that always comes up here is the Warriors on the road in every series that Steph, Clay, and Draymond have played together, going back to 2013. Before Steve Kerr was the head coach even, they did it 3 times with Mark Jackson. And then in the last 23 times with Steve Kerr, they've won a road game in every single playoff series. So if they obviously have to do it, Steph addressed it today, they have to do it again or they're not going to win the NBA championship, but they have been able to do it. And historically been able to go in and win the first game in a venue, whether it's game 3, as they did against Dallas, as they did against Denver, or game 1, as it was in Memphis without the home court advantage, where they tend to go in and take the life out of the opposition and out of the fans in the first one, and then they can play the rest of it on schedule and from a position of advantage.
Yeah.
John Dickinson, some may not be aware of this. JD may be the only human on the planet who has better sports recall than Kenny Caraway.
He's got crazy recall, man.
It's like 1-2. Like in the power rank, it might even be 1A and 1B. Like these two
can got that recall, man.
Tell me about Game 3 NBA Finals 1989. Oh man, that was
the Pistons beat the brakes off the Lakers in LA.
They did in the fourth, yeah. 2-0, and the Lakers started coming up hurt.
Yeah. They beat the brakes off them boys.
Lakers started coming up hurt in game 3. I think by game 4, Magic and maybe Byron Scott weren't playing. I think they both had hamstrings.
Yeah, facts.
I wasn't serious. To be clear, like I was not even remotely serious. JD, appreciate you, my man. Enjoy Boston, which is an odd sentence to utter, but try.
I'm doing my best. Doing my best.
Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for carving out some time for us. Great seeing you.
All right, you got it. Thanks for having me.